Tonight's web. My name is Colette Pugh, and I'm going to be co-hosting this meeting with Ying Smith. Ying, say hi.
Hello.
Um, so we're both from LHOF's Waste Management Group, and we work to promote recycling. LHOF is a nonprofit organization, and this webinar is actually part of LHOF's Community Outreach Program. We have a special guest with us today, Dr. Diaz, and he's kindly agreed to put together a presentation for this webinar. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Reinhardt for putting us in contact with Dr. Diaz, and we owe it all to her that we're able to have this webinar tonight. One more thing, if you have
Tomorrow.
wait until the end of the presentation because we have a Q&A section. It'll be about 15 to 20 minutes, and you can ask the questions you have about the presentation to Dr. Diaz. Again, thank you so much to Dr. Diaz, and whenever you're ready, you can feel free to introduce yourself and you can start screen sharing.
You want me to introduce myself?
If you want to, and then you can screen share and start your presentation.
I sent you my CV. I thought somebody else was going to do it, but I'll give you a very quick presentation. I have a doctorate in environmental engineering from the University of California at Berkeley, where I did basic research on resource recovery, both materials and biogas and compost. But then I established a consulting firm in 1975, and I recently retired. So I've been in the waste business for nearly 50 years, giving lectures, doing presentations, teaching, and of course, working in probably 40, 50 countries around the world. And I published 12, 15 books and several hundred articles. And now I'm retired in the island of Kauai, Hawaii.
All right, Dr. Diaz, when you feel ready, you can share your presentation and you can go ahead and start.
Okay. Can you see that?
No, maybe try resharing it.
Ah. I'm trying to share my screen. There we go. Okay. So this is, can you all see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go very quickly.
In presentation mode?
It is on presentation mode.
I think you picked the wrong screen. We're looking at it. We see all your, like.
Okay.
But it's fine. I mean, it fills the screen.
Oh, no.
You need to go to the slideshow and
The presentation mode.
and then that's where you get the presentation mode.
The slideshow right in the middle there. Oh.
No. I haven't.
There you
How's
go.
that?
Perfect.
I've been using Teams recently. It's all convoluted. Okay, look, I'm going to give you a very quick presentation on managing solid waste in economically developing countries. Remember, this is applicable only to countries that are developing economically. And this is the outline of what I'm going to talk about, some of the major issues, then the importance of waste characterization, the role that the organic matter, the organic components play in the management of the waste, sustainability, what can we do as critical innovations, the keys to success, and then I'll conclude very quickly. Now, one of the major things, the major difficulties that we have around the world is a substantial population growth in urban centers. We don't have realistic long-term planning, limited collection service, lack of proper disposal sites, the use of inappropriate technology, and inappropriate methods of finance. Now, I'm going to cover each one of these a little more thoroughly. So a population, I tell you, will keep growing and growing and growing, and people are migrating from rural to urban centers. And those major centers don't have the infrastructure to provide basic services to the migrants. In this slide, I show you the population of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. As you can see, I have 10 of them. The ones in yellow are in developing countries, and the two in white are in a well-developed country, Japan. But so 8 out of 10 are in developing countries where they have millions and millions of people. With respect to planning, what I see is that most of the plans that are prepared by people that are not familiar with the area, and then these people provide suggestions for unrealistic the unrealistic infrastructure, the financial and human resources. So what I see in, I would say, most of the large areas in developing countries is a tendency toward crisis management. And this means that people in the municipality wait till the last minute to do something, to make a decision on waste management, especially on siting new landfills. Then some of these decisions are made in response to solicitation by vendors, equipment vendors. Some of them are good, some of them are not very good. So that's what you have to be concerned about. And of course, no training and very little reliable data. The urban poor receive minimal, if any, waste management collection services, whereas the high income areas receive between 20 to 80%, 60 to 80% coverage. And this is why also the marginal areas just evolve without planning, and generally do not pay any taxes, and consequently, the politicians don't feel compelled to provide those services. Terribly managed, they call them sanitary landfills, but they're essentially dump sites. They have difficulties in siting those landfills, higher capital and operating costs, and some of the ones don't have any tipping fees, so they're very, very low, so they don't charge anything to go for you to dispose your waste in the landfills. The dump sites are basically uncontrolled. As you can see, these are slides from different countries around the world, and you're scavenging. And all ages, all genders, male, female, boys, girls, and hardly any costs associated with the siting or the operation of these sites. The typical problem is the use of inappropriate technology. I have seen some very complex processes. It's pretty evident to get sometimes very expensive collection equipment that they cannot maintain, and then the incorrect balance between labor and equipment. Some of the equipment, the collection vehicles, for example, are operated way, way beyond their economic lifespan. A typical collection vehicle in an industrialized country, say in the United States, has a lifetime of economic lifetime, 5 to 8 years. And as you can see, that collection vehicle in a country in Asia, it's extremely old and barely able to be on the road. And if you notice here, no drawers. The equipment, particularly collection equipment with hydraulic operation, cannot be maintained. They don't have the replacement parts, and consequently, you see these cemeteries of old, unused vehicles that cannot be repaired. And that's a lot of money. Each one of them, at the very least, will cost you 50, 60,000 US dollars. Generally, the equipment that's used in waste management has a short lifespan, between six to 8 years. But then the loans that the people get, that the governments get, finance these pieces of equipment for up 20 to 30 years. So it doesn't make any sense for you to be paying a loan when the equipment has already been broken. And the municipalities are so poor that they don't have any resources to service those loans. So they have to think about very carefully whether or not they want to get loans with these conditions. Like the waste characterization is one of the, it's not the only one, but one of the key parts in waste management. You have to know how much you have to deal with, the quantities per day, per month, per year. It has to be site specific. That means that you cannot use the results of one country and apply it to another, or even one municipality to another one. And those data have to be reliable. You use the data for planning, for design, to reach goals, and to develop markets or uses for the materials that you recover. So waste characterization is a basic step, and this is one of many that we have organized in different countries, where you have to manually segregate the wastes according to a prescribed methodology. And then you get results after a long period of time doing the sampling. And you see here, I show you how the waste varies as a function of income. The low, middle, and high income areas in a particular municipality definitely produce different types of wastes. And especially you see the amount of organic waste. But this is all important for the planning and the design. And the composition of the waste for a low income area. I'm just giving you examples because I want you to understand that even the waste is different. You see one pile in one place, and you see another in another place, and it's going to be different. So it would require different ways of management. This is a waste from a municipality in Metro Manila, from a market waste. So as you would expect, to have a large concentration of kitchen and food waste in the markets. The same thing, the variation varies as a function of location, low income areas, offices, industrial areas, markets, etc. The main point that I want to drive here is that you need these data to be able to develop a well-prepared plan and reliable. In general, in case you are going to be offering some assistance in some places, the quantity of waste ranges from 0.25 to 1.5 kilos per capita per day. I left it in kilos because that's very typical worldwide. And the per capita generation in developing countries is 2 to 3 times lower than in industrialized countries. So you cannot take data from the United States and try to apply it in some place in Asia, Southeast Asia, or Latin America. The same thing for the bulk density. they vary from 180 to almost half a ton, 500 kilos per cubic meter in some areas. So and it has a very, very high moisture content, extremely high, very different from our wastes. So I'm going to focus on the organic matter, since I've made a case that the organic waste is one of the major components of the waste in developing countries, and you would want to treat it before you take it to the landfill. And you know the negative aspects of just putting raw waste into landfills, particularly organic matter, going to produce biogas, uncontrolled generation of methane, and all climate change impacts. So we need to do that. It should be good to do that by training people, give them the proper information on how to compost. You need fairly homogeneous feedstocks, control them, and then monitor. And I'll show you very quickly some very simple options. But then you need to produce a material that's going to be useful to the community or to the farmer. So it's got to have high quality and consistent. It should meet the user demands, which is the user may not want to see a lot of glass contamination or plastic contamination and a certain MPK, which is the way that you judge the quality of a fertilizer. And then develop the markets, try to get people to use it, or at least recover some of your investment by charging them per ton or per kilo. But in terms of using all these technologies, there are some risks associated with that. Technological, if you get too sophisticated and take problems, financial risks, marketing, environmental, and public health. Environmental, for example, if you have a poorly managed composting operation, then the odors are going to be terrible. You can imagine partially degraded organic matter in one place, and the odors migrate several feet away from the site. The projects have to be sustainable. So it has to be, you have to have some revenues to balance your costs. You have to be sustainable from the technical aspects. You have to provide public education and demonstration programs so that people can understand what you're doing. And of course, have to have the human resources to manage these processes. Financial sustainability would imply you have to charge user fees, which means that if someone is going to receive the collection process at your house or your business, you have to be willing to pay. And for that, you use the willingness to pay survey. There are ways to do that as well. But also the government can provide some subsidies, and or you get some outside funding to help you develop your program. When I say low cost, that does not necessarily mean low quality. And this is a fairly common issue, that you want to produce something that is terrible. And then all of these projects should be conducted by knowledgeable professionals, because on the surface you think, oh, I can do that. It's very simple. I composted my waste in my backyard for several years, but when you have only a few cubic yards per day, and then you multiply that by 100, that is a different situation. And always consider labor-intensive options, because as you may know, labor is relatively inexpensive in most developing countries, and why not use them? Technical sustainability, use small-scale programs, home composting, vermiculture, which is the use of worms for processing the organic matter, manual aeration, and then use community-based systems for small communities, help them to set up the program. And this is an example of how you can do it manually, set up your piles. And if worse comes to worse, you can use a front-end loader for mechanical aeration or forced aeration using blowers. The technology is increasing complexity. That's has been done in different countries. You see market waste there. I think I set this program up to demonstrate the possibility of composting market waste in a small community in South America. You see the piles that were set up, so that it was a combination of training the operator and also training the people around in the community. And they had, I suggested that they number their piles so they could keep controlling them. And obviously you see from on the left, you see the raw waste, and then towards the right, you see how the material turns into a nice brownish color and good soil properties. We can promote medium to large scale processes, but use locally manufactured materials or equipment. But also make sure that if you're going to buy something from other countries, that you have access to replacement parts, because that is a very typical problem. One piece of equipment that's critical to the operation breaks down, you have to first of all request to buy the part through the municipality. Then the part has to be shipped from overseas, and that takes time. Also, if you are getting something from a vendor, demand guarantees and make sure that there are several environmental controls in place for the process. And in some countries I have seen, they make their own composting digesters, homemade. So it's, sorry, the biodigesters as well. Social sustainability is also important. So you have to use the professionals in the area to how to communicate with the people in the municipality. And different people would use different methodologies. In some places they have access to radio, TV, others in the church. In Mongolia, for example, where I worked in very remote communities, they rely on radio for knowing what's going on, the news. No television, obviously. And you have to do this continually. Public education is a continuous process. These programs have to use simple language, nothing sophisticated in terms of terminology. Use a local dialect if you're in a country where they have different dialects. Use the children. I think the children are very good communicators that take their ideas home and get their parents to become involved in waste management. And of course, lastly, but not finally, is the media, business leaders, and get them involved in the waste management aspects. When you use the compost, for example, what kinds of plants do you grow in the area? Show them to the public, and this is a municipally owned nursery, and then you arrange for visitors to go and see the plants that are being grown with the homemade compost. In general, also you need to have basic training. Train the community leaders on the key aspects of composting, how to select the substrates, the materials they're going to treat. For example, kitchen wastes, market wastes, how to set up the pile, how to mix it, talk about the controlling factors, temperature, moisture content, etc., and then how to monitor the process. The the affordability is going to be a function of the type and size of community. That's why we have to contact the users of the process, and I insisted to have a willingness to pay survey to see how much a typical householder would be willing to pay for the service per month or per year, however it's collected. Ask them whether or not they'd be willing to pay just a little more to get better service. And then after that, you define the level of subsidy by the government. Standardize your collection system. You have to standardize containers and the type of frequency of service. You'd be surprised when you go to other countries, you see people storing the waste in buckets, in cardboard boxes, in plastic bags, and provide a reliable collection service so that the population can feel that they are getting a better service and then should be willing to pay a little more. Establish a transfer system if you need to locate a landfill site a little bit further. And most importantly, you have to also have a final disposal system that is well designed for the wastes, the materials that cannot be treated and cannot be marketed. In terms of final disposal, closure of dump sites. Most countries in most developing areas do not have landfill sites as we know them here in the United States. So they should close them because they are contaminating our environment, contaminating groundwater. Then design and operate modern sanitary landfills. But I have to stress that when I say modern, you don't have to copy the rules and design criteria from regulations in Germany or the United States. You can develop some reasonable criteria. Then develop a program for managing the organic waste. And you see that I'm focusing organic waste, but that's because that is the most problematic and the largest component of residential waste. And then recycling programs. You can establish recycling programs, different types. But for that, you have to use who's going to use those materials, how they want them purchase the specifications. And then after that, you're going to see how we're going to recover those, recover the costs. So, and if you're going to be working in other countries, you have to, first of all, determine the political will to solve the problem. And if the mayor or the lady mayor is not interested in solving the problem, I tell you, you're going to have a difficult time trying to get it solved because they control the whole process. Then help them develop realistic plans on site selection, your financial and human resources. What markets do you have to be able to recycle the materials? And of course, finally, you have to have a good final disposal site. So once you have a system, you have to monitor your operations. You have to have a good modern regulatory framework. Public education must be carried out continuously, because that is a key factor in how you're going to put your waste management process into place. And then formal education. You would be surprised. I would like you to tell me which college or university in the United States produces professionals with expertise in solid waste management, as we call them, engineering. Do they get a degree on that, Debbie? Like solid waste management engineers?
No, they're environmental engineers, but you know, they do research and learn about solid waste. But yeah, you're right. It's not only solid waste.
But see, that's right. Doing research is very helpful. There's several of those here in the States, but we do not have a professional. Like we say, okay, I want to have a pediatrician in the medical profession. And in engineering, you say, I want a garbage manager. You don't have one. We don't have a bachelor's of science in solid waste management or master's. Some doctorates are. I did my research in waste management, but my degree is on environmental engineer, because Berkeley does not have a program either. But other countries like in Germany, in Austria, have these programs already, and they have a long history of waste management. So I have to insist that we need to have formal education so we can send out these professionals and help the communities, not only in our country, but in other countries. And I think that's the end of my presentation for now. I'm sorry, I went very quickly to be able to cover all of the things that I wanted to cover, and I have time for questions.
Okay, so hello everyone. This is Ying, and I will be hosting the Q&A session for our webinar. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Diaz and Dr. Reinhardt, for spending the time with us on the Saturday night. And just to talk about a little bit about me, I enrolled in the environmental science class in my school this year to get more of an understanding about the environmental protections and waste management industry. I'm not sure whether I will choose this major in college, but I'm really interested in this subject right now. But that's, yeah. So I do have a couple questions. So do you think US is a developing country from the environmental protection prospect?
Do I think what? I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Oh, do you think US is a developing country from the environmental protection prospect?
Wow, that's a loaded question. In some parts, we are well advanced. In other parts of the country, I'm not going to say which, but I think you'll probably be able to tell they are all just beginning. They still have poorly managed landfills, hardly any recycling and composting, resource recovery. But the US as a whole is well advanced, although there are other countries in Europe that are all in all, when I say environmental management, I'm talking about air quality, water quality, solid waste.
Okay, so for my next question, it has been reported that the US has dumped waste such as aluminum and junk cars in China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Are you aware if US is currently still participating in this practice?
So I missed the question.
Sorry, I'm not that loud, but it has been reported that US has dumped waste such as aluminum and junk cars in China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Are you aware if US is currently still participating in this practice?
The US, but you have to remember that some of these regulations, some of these controls fall onto the responsibility of the states. Each state is able to set up different requirements as long as the very minimum comply with the US EPA. So in terms of used vehicles, old vehicles, and tires. Different states have different requirements. And I'll tell you the state in California where I lived and spent most of my life, they began to set up, you had to bring your old tires when you bought the new ones. And you also had to bring in your old batteries when you bought a new one. So but that's one state in the entire country, and then others have different controls.
Okay, so I do have one more question, but there is a question in the chat. How does the treatment of organic waste work in the US generally? Is there typically industrial composting for US waste?
Industrial compost, you mean the industrial size or in the composting of industrial waste?
In the industrial side.
Composting, if I understand the question correctly, you're talking about the large composting operations. Yes, there are some, there's several composting operations that deal with hundreds of cubic yards per day, well maintained, well operated, and I've been at that for a long time. I'm particularly knowledgeable with the entire West Coast, Oregon, Washington, California. They've had several composting facilities along those states.
Okay, I do have actually one more question. In your opinion, which countries would you say have best practices for handling waste management, and what are those what are the best practices in your opinion?
Oh, you're asking very difficult questions. I like some of the philosophy and some of the requirements that have been set forth by members of the EU. Germany, Austria are well advanced. They've been producing real waste managers from universities for quite a long time already. So they're well, in my mind, they're well advanced, not only in terms of the management processes, but also looking towards solving more detailed problems. So I would look to Europe, Western Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Diaz, maybe I can add one comment here. So my kids and I, we lived in North Europe, Scandinavia, Sweden, for many years. So a few years ago, we moved to the States, and I would still say I remember I got very shocked when I saw how much waste American produce. And also I think the way we do recycling is quite okay, and Sweden maybe a little bit better. Yeah, so I definitely echo your comment that European countries they're more advanced than us. Yeah, I didn't live in Germany, but I've been there quite many times. Yeah, so I do feel they are at a similar level. Yeah, so I think we can do better in America, I think. Yeah, but of course, I like Ying's question about whether America is developing, kind of like developing countries in terms of waste management. Maybe my kids maybe give too much impression of how good the European countries are. Yeah, but I think overall in the world, we're still good. Yeah, but certainly we have a lot of things to improve in America. Yeah, so that's kind of like my view, to echo what you said. Yeah, so
yeah, I agree with you. See, that's a very important observation, is the social aspects, the public education aspects. And I remember, I'll tell you a real story. This is a few years back. One of my colleagues from Germany went to visit me in San Francisco, And the first thing she said when she came out of the airport was, I did not find a place where I could recycle my water bottle in the airport. And she was right. But that was a few years back. Now they've been instituted. But that's the level of participation of the public, that they're raised in that environment.
Okay.
Louis, would you mind stop sharing your screen so we can see you better? Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so there is another question from Audrey, and she asked, how will the use of electric cars increase or decrease issues with battery disposal?
The which? I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
I'll just read it again. How will the use of electric cars increase or decrease issues with battery disposal?
The proposal?
Battery disposal.
Or for the disposal?
Battery. Battery. I think the EV cars, they will have a, they have a batteries, and we need to recycle them. Yeah. What is the impact? Yeah, we're doing transform from to the electrical cars, but we produce more waste. Yeah. In terms of battery, how we're going to, what kind of environmental impact they will have.
Yeah, well, we almost I see on a monthly basis, almost we're producing different materials, and we're producing more and more waste. And that's something that we have to work on as a country, to be able to manage these. And what I've said for a long time is that a manufacturer of these materials should not be allowed to produce them until they let us know how they're going to be recycled. All these materials will be recycled or treated. But now we're producing all kinds of materials that sometimes are difficult to process and recycle. But we have the tendency, we're just big consumers as a country, big consumers.
I actually have a question. So I was wondering, are there any developing countries or areas in developing countries that are currently successful in practicing the process of waste management that you described?
Wow, not many. I'd have to really do a soul searching, but most of these efforts are municipality, at the municipality level, but as a country, there are very few, if any. But it's because of what I said earlier, that the lack of interest in that problem. But politicians don't seem to understand it, that the long-term impacts that we generate. Imagine, and this is an argument that I'm having here in the island of Kauai. We continue to use a landfill. And my point is, imagine 30, 40 years from now, we're going to have the island dotted with landfills. Imagine each country should be thinking in those terms. This is a little island, and we got to manage this waste, because we contaminate the air, we contaminate the soil, and in this case, water, groundwater.
Thank you. And also going off of that, like how long do you think it'll take for different areas to set up a proper waste management system, like 10 years or 5 or 20?
It's again a function of what else you do with the people, not only the type of program, but also the way that you get the public involved. And that can be just a few years, but I haven't seen any that it can be, as has been done in a short time. Particularly the large communities, the large urban areas that I pointed out to you, they're almost as big as a country. very difficult to manage the waste, like in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Mexico City, Mexico, and so on. So it takes years, and it takes a lot of education. That's the main thing that we have to do.
I see. Thank you.
And if you're thinking about, you as a group, you're thinking about going to other countries and helping, that's the thing that you have to concentrate in, well, not only the technical aspects, but also the educational aspects at all levels, the politicians, the professionals, and the public that are going to be participating in these aspects.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, thanks. So I'm kind of cheating here, but I saw your CV and I noticed that you've worked with projects in like China, and so a lot of those are like kind of Chinese. But like, how do you think that like the U.S. compares to like mainland China in terms of like wastes and stuff?
In terms of development, I'm sorry, the last part, I missed the last part.
And in terms of like just like how we do in terms of like waste management, economically, not economically, like environmentally friendly and all that.
Compared to other countries?
Mostly just the U.S. and China specifically, but
Well, as I said,
yeah.
Victor, as I said earlier, the way that the wastes are managed in the United States as a whole varies completely from state to state, because as I said, the EPA sets forth basic requirements, very, very basic. And then each state has a prerogative to put into place different programs as long as they meet those basic requirements by the EPA. So some are very aggressive in terms of proper waste management, and others are not. Especially some countries in the South.
Dr. Diaz.
Yes.
Thank you for speaking with us this evening. I have a question. Given that the U.S. imports so much of its the products that we buy, consumer products and the like, how do we prevent producers and/or distributors from externalizing the cost related to recycling?
Oof, that's a politically charged question. That is a problem. We've got tons and tons of electronic wastes and used automobiles, and you see what happened when China said no more buying of I'm not buying your recycled products. So it's a politically difficult item to deal with, because you would have to input restrictions on the manufacturers as well.
Yes, you'd mentioned about, in certain, like in California and here, some items like car batteries, when you go to buy a new battery, you need to return your old battery. Are there some other options in that context that might be able to work for other products as well?
That's right, but it's difficult to put into place. But yes, that would be a good solution. But you can imagine how many types of electronic products we have. It's complex, but feasible.
Thank you.
What we're doing in many of our states is they go to primarily to China, the electronic wastes.
But Dr. Diaz, I think it's good when China said no more recycled waste, because that put more pressure on us in America, and we need to do better. We cannot dump our waste to the developing world, because they have a more difficult to recycle than us. So I think it's actually, from an environmental point of view, I think it's good. Yeah.
That's right. We'd have to put those into place.
Yeah. we need to do better here. Yeah.
Yeah, the advantage is, advantage is not the wrong word to pick. That China uses a lot of labor-intensive programs for the recycling. So that's not cost-effective in the U.S. That's
yeah.
one major difference.
Yeah, that's a good aspect. Yeah, thank you.
Is there any more questions?
Well, another one of my questions is like, do you think that like culture, like, you know, how like every country has like a different culture, do you think that might play a role in like how they like differ in terms of how they do waste management, and also like how that like culture differences might like impact like your different approaches to like public education?
Yeah, but there are very few countries that are using these strategies. But I don't know why we don't put them into practice. As I said, some of the Western European countries have been doing this public education for a long time. So some generations have grown up with that, and they're used to it. It's an automatic thing to do, to recycle, to dispose of the waste properly. You don't see that very typically. Somebody in Austria would throw a aluminum can, a beverage can, into the street. Very rarely, but we see that in developing countries a lot, and that takes time. But public education is, yes, it's very critical. Well,
Anyways, but I believe that is all of the questions. If you still have any more questions related to the environmental science, waste management, you could go ahead and ask them in the chat. But once again, thank you, Dr. Diaz, for your presentation, and I hope you enjoy your Saturday afternoon in Hawaii.
I will, but also I wanted to point out to you that you have my email address. If something specific comes to mind later or in the future, yeah, just feel free to send me a message, okay?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for inviting me, and I hope that I didn't discourage you. It just gives you more energy to do the work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
very much.
doctor. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.